Hi. I recently got a great question from a student about why is 7/10 greater than 7/100. This student knew the rule. She was able to answer questions correctly, but she wondered why is that? And I really wanted to answer that because it matters, and a lot of times people are not 100% clear on that. So let's get started. The first thing we have to review is a little bit about fractions. We need a little background on fractions. Here we go. So, when we have a fraction, for example, let's take a nice familiar one, 3/4, we really need to know and understand the terminology associated. So, the first thing you want to know is what that bottom number means. Of course, it is the denominator. And it tells us how many parts, equal parts, how many parts the whole has been split into. Okay, so that's what the denominator tells us. The numerator, this top part, the numerator tells us how many parts are we describing. Or how many, I'm going to say how many parts are being described. So that's what that tells us. So we've got to know those two basic terms and what they mean in the context of fractions. Let's take a look further into this fraction that I've chosen to look at, 3/4. Here we go. So if we take 3/4 and study it a little further, there it is, 3/4. We can understand this fraction in a lot of different ways because we don't know what it's always going to be talking about. It might be talking about what I like to think of as an area model. And this is what you're probably most familiar with, is if you see like a picture of a pie. 4 parts altogether, 4 equal parts, and they're talking about 3 of them. That's what we're describing is 3/4. 4 parts altogether, 3 of them being described. But it's not always a circle, right? It could be a rectangle. 4 equal parts are how many parts there are altogether. 3 are being described like that. Or it might be a more unusual shape. Maybe it's that same rectangle, but maybe it's split into equal parts like this. There's still 4 equal parts, and maybe we're describing those 3. And that still describes 3/4. So there are different ways of looking at it that all can accurately describe 3/4. 4 parts altogether, 3 of them are being described. In this case, 3 of them are shaded in. Another way we might see fractions represented is to represent a distance, like on a number line. Let's take a look at that. So the whole in this case is 1. Oops, that's supposed to be a 1. Looks crazy. We're going to split it up into 4 equal parts. There they are. We are describing 3 of them. So we're going to jump 1, 2, 3. 3 out of 4 equal parts. There are 4 equal parts altogether. We're talking about 3 of them. I've walked 3/4 of the way to my home or what have you. So that place on the line is 3/4. Another way you might see fractions represented, or certainly should understand them, is a part of a set, right? So, what do I like? I like Skittles. right here I've got 12 Skittles. And let's just say that 3/4 of them are orange Skittles. So we've got to figure out what's a fourth out of those 12. There's 1 part, 2 parts, 3 parts, 4 parts. Because if I divide those 12 Skittles up into 4 equal groups, each group is going to have 3. It's just a coincidence that that's the same number. I probably should have done something different. Actually, let's say that I had 16 Skittles. So if I had 16 Skittles altogether, split them up into 4 equal groups, let's say 3/4 of the Skittles are orange. There you go. 3/4 of those Skittles are orange. And you could think of different ways of having a fraction be expressed. Like maybe it represents time, right? It's time to go in 3/4 of an hour. So if you take that hour, we'll represent it on the clock, and you partition it into 4 equal parts, you would use 3/4 of them, that's 45 minutes, right? That's a weird picture, but you get the idea. Or it might be something a little more abstract, like your mom might walk in and say, it looks like you're about 3/4 of the way done cleaning your room. That means you still have some more left. So sometimes it's a little more abstract. Or it might be representing people, right? 3/4 of the people, of the students have completed all their homework. So it could represent, fractions represent lots of different things. Just remember, the denominator indicates how many parts the whole has been divided into, and the numerator indicates how many parts we're talking about. That brings us to the next part, which is this. A smaller denominator indicates a bigger piece. But how many pieces your numerator still matters. So to look at that, we'll just take a look like this. I've taken just a regular piece of paper and I split it up into 4 equal parts. So that 4 is my denominator. And you can see that we won't even indicate how many. We'll just say 4 is the denominator. So however many, it's out of 4, right? So something up here is out of 4. Here I've taken the exact same piece of paper and I folded it to split it up into 4, 8, 12, 16 equal parts. So in this case, the denominator would be 16. So this is a good demonstration how we can see that the size of the denominator indicates the size of the part. And actually, a smaller denominator, like a 4th, is actually a larger portion than a larger denominator, like a 16th. And that's essentially brings us back to our first question about why the tenths are larger than the hundredths. So now we just have to remember that decimals are actually fractions. They're fractions that fit within our decimal, within our place 10 system. So 6/10 represents 6/10. 6/100 represents 6/100. And now, based on this reasoning, a smaller denominator indicating a larger portion, or a larger denominator indicating a smaller piece, can help us understand that if we had 6/10, that would be a much smaller amount of the whole than, I said it wrong, back it up that little bit. If we had 6/100, that would indicate a much smaller portion of the whole than would 6/10. However, students, just because you've memorized that rule doesn't mean you don't have to think. You still have to think. Just because you see tenths doesn't automatically mean more. You still have to think. Because is 3/10 more or 99/100? Remember, 3/10 is like this. 99/100 is like this. So you still have to think it over and make sure you know which one is worth more. In this case, it's 99/100ths because that's almost the whole, and 3/10 is only a part of it. So this little paper is just to remind you that even though you know the rule, you still have to think about it. Yep,